The days after meeting felt different, as if the entire neighborhood had awakened from a long sleep. People who once looked away now stopped me in driveways or at the mailbox to whisper their support. They spoke in hushed voices, still cautious, but no longer willing to bow to Kerren's rule. Emma walked with her braces in the yard again, and though she still glanced nervously toward Kerren's house, she smiled when neighbors waved at her. The fortress of fear was crumbling piece by piece. But Kerren did not vanish quietly. She stormed through the streets with the fury of a cornered beast, plastering notices on doors, threatening fines for imagined violations. She knocked on my door one evening, her face twisted with rage, and shouted, "You think you can humiliate me, but I run this community. You will regret this." I met her glare with calm silence, holding the door half open while Emma stood behind me. I said nothing because I knew words were wasted on her. She stormed off, leaving the echo of her sandals slapping the pavement. The next HOA meeting came sooner than expected. Kerren had called it herself in a desperate attempt to reclaim authority. The hall was packed tighter than I had ever seen neighbors squeeze shoulder to shoulder, buzzing with tension. Emma held my hand, her grip firm. Kerren entered wearing a blazer, even brighter than before, her lipstick sharp, her smile brittle. She sat at the head of the table, tapping her pen against the microphone. "We are here to address slander and lies," she declared. "Evidence has been manipulated. I will prove my innocence tonight." Her voice was loud, but there was a crack in it, a tremor that betrayed fear. She began rattling off excuses about doctored videos, about jealous neighbors, about conspiracies to dethrone her. The room shifted uncomfortably, and I rose to my feet, slowly waiting for silence. When the noise settled, I stepped forward, holding a new folder. "You want the truth?" I said. "Then let us show the truth to everyone tonight." I laid out more documents, this time financial statements traced back through her personal accounts, showing HOA funds redirected into her own projects, copies of permits denied by the city, while she built illegal extensions on her home, photographs of her dogs roaming freely, though she had fined others for the same infraction, and finally letters from neighbors who had been bullied into silence. Each page I turned was another nail in the coffin of her reign. The crowd erupted with anger, voices rising against her. Kerren shouted, "These are lies," but her voice was swallowed by the chorus of betrayal. I reached for the final piece of video once more, but this time I let it play longer. It showed Emma crying in my arms after Kerren ripped away her braces. It showed neighbors in the background, horrified and frozen. The sound of Emma's sobs filled the hall, and the room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by her faint whimper on the recording. Kerren slammed her hands on the table. "This is not fair. She is just weak. She should not even be outside." The words slipped out before she realized what she had said, and in that instant the last of her defenders turned away. A woman in the front row stood and said, "How dare you speak about a child like that?" Others followed their voices, rising into a storm of condemnation. Police officers who had been quietly stationed at the back of the room stepped forward. One read from a document citing complaints of harassment and evidence of assault. Kerren's face drained of color as the officer announced that charges were being filed and that she was suspended from her role as president effective immediately, pending investigation. The hall erupted with cheers and applause, neighbors clapping their hands together, shouting words of relief. Emma squeezed my hand and whispered, "She cannot hurt us anymore," and I felt my chest tighten with emotion. Kerren was let out of the hall, her protests echoing into the night, but no one listened. For the first time, her voice had lost its grip on the neighborhood. The weeks that followed sealed her fate. She was removed from the board, fined heavily for mismanagement, and forced to sell her house. Her once perfect porch stood empty, the flagpole bare, the windows dark. Neighbors began to breathe freely again, and for the first time the community felt like a place where families could live without fear of petty tyranny. Emma grew braver each day. She played in the yard with her ball, again her laughter returning like music to the street. Neighbors joined her games, bringing their children over to play too. What had once been a symbol of shame was now a symbol of strength. The braces she wore did not lower the value of the neighborhood. They raised the value of its spirit. One evening, the neighborhood Facebook group banner changed. The title read, "No More Kerrens on the Lawn," and the cover photo was a cartoon drawing of Kerren yelling while a child in braces kicked a soccer ball past her. It spread quickly through the community, turning into a local meme that left everyone laughing, except the woman who had once ruled them. I sat on the porch with Emma, watching her play in the glow of the setting sun. She turned to me, her braces gleaming in the light, and said, "This is our lawn now," and I knew she was right. The fear was gone. The cruelty had been defeated, and in its place stood resilience and hope. Justice had not only been served, it had been seen. And in that moment, I understood that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with fists or shouts, but with truth, patience, and the unshakable determination to protect what matters most. The sound of wood splitting against the wind made my blood run hot as I stared at the brand-new fence that carved a cruel line across my ranch. It stood tall and smug, stretching over the open fields where my cattle once roamed free. The air smelled of fresh-cut timber, sharp and arrogant, like the message it carried. This land was mine, passed down through generations, every inch of soil tied to my family history. And yet someone had the audacity to stake there, claim with cheap lumber and iron nails. I pressed my boots into the dirt, feeling the tremor of anger in my chest. My hands curled into fists. My ranch was not just land, it was freedom. It was the echo of my father's laughter, the call of the morning roosters, the whisper rain over crops. It was everything that gave meaning to the life I built. And now this fence stood in defiance, daring me to challenge it. Neighbors had gathered at the edge of the gravel road, watching in silence. Their whispers floated through the air like gnats, too quiet to catch, but loud enough to sting. I could see pity in some eyes, fear in others, and a strange satisfaction. In a few, it was then that she appeared, the woman who had turned my life into a chessboard. She believed she already won. Her name was Linda Prescott, president of the local HOA, a title she carried like a crown. She walked with stiffness that screamed superiority. Her smile, thin and venomous, carried no warmth. Her sunglasses reflected the fence back at me as though she had planted her flag on conquered territory. She had been a thorn in many sides, but now she had driven her roots straight into mine. "Order is everything," she said, her voice laced with syrup and steel. "This fence is necessary. You may think your land is separate, but the community has decided otherwise. We are simply maintaining standards." I could taste the bitterness of her words. Each syllable was a nail hammered into the wood, standing between me and my freedom. I forced my voice steady, though it trembled with fury. "This is my property. You had no right to touch it, let alone build on it." She tilted her head, mock sympathy dripping from her smile. "You ranchers think land is a personal kingdom, but rules are rules, and this community is under my jurisdiction." Her arrogance hung in the air, heavier than the storm clouds rolling across the horizon. I searched the faces of the onlookers, hoping for support, but no one dared speak. Their silence was her shield, and she knew it. Her smugness widened into a grin, as though she had already buried me under that fence. I stepped close to the scent of her expensive perfume, clashing with the earthy dust of my ranch. "Take it down, Linda, or I will." Her laugh pierced the air, sharp and cold. "Oh, you will do nothing. If you lay a finger on it, we will bury you in lawsuits until you beg for mercy." The crowd chuckled nervously, as if caught between fear and amusement. I saw in their eyes the spell she had cast. They believed her power was absolute. They believed I was already defeated. My chest tightened with a mix of rage and helplessness. I wanted to tear that fence apart, board by board, and watch it crumble under my boots. But I also knew the game she was playing. She wanted me to act on impulse, to give her the weapon of law she could twist against me. She wanted to see me sink, while she stood above, smiling. I turned my gaze back to the fence. Its shadow cut across the pasture, like a scar, an ugly reminder that even freedom could be fenced in. If you let tyrants walk unchecked, it would smell of fresh stain. But to me it reeked of trespass and betrayal. I clenched my jaw so tight it ached. For a moment silence swallowed us. The wind rattled the wires. The cattle shifted uneasily in the distance. My heart pounded against my ribs, demanding action. My mind screamed patience. A war had been declared, and wars were not won in a single charge. Linda raised her chin, satisfied with my hesitation. "Good," she said. "Learn your place. It will save you trouble." Her words echoed long after she turned her back, strutting toward her car with victory. In every step the fence loomed over me, a mocking sentinel daring me to defy her. I could almost hear my father's voice whispering in my ear about the worth of this land, about the pride of standing tall against anyone who tried to take it. That voice fueled the fire burning inside me. As the car engine roared and faded into the distance, the crowd dispersed. Some avoided my eyes, others offered weak nods of sympathy, but not one stood beside me. I was left alone with the fence, and the fury boiling in my veins. I touched the rough wood beneath my palm, splinters biting into my skin. Each sting was a reminder of the insult, each line of grain, a reminder of her arrogance. She believed she had won with her threats and her paperwork. She believed the fence was permanent. But as I stood there with the sun dipping low in the sky, painted in angry streaks of red, one truth hardened in my chest: this was far from over. She might think she held all the power, but she had underestimated the one thing stronger than her rules: a man defending what was his. And with that realization, I turned toward my home, each step heavier than the last, my resolve solidifying. Like steel, the fence would not stand forever. She had started a battle she could not finish. The days that followed were a parade of provocations. Each morning, I found a new envelope nailed to my gate demanding fines for fabricated violations. One letter claimed my barn roof was the wrong color. Another accused me of storing equipment in view of the road. Another demanded monthly fees. I never agreed to the HOA logo stamped at the top mocked me with every notice, as though Linda herself had signed them with a smirk. Neighbors began to shift their behavior. Some who once waved now avoided my eyes. Others whispered. When I passed, the power of fear moved faster than truth, and Linda thrived on it. She strutted through the community, clipboard in hand, inspecting yards and driveways like a queen inspecting her kingdom. Every glance from her was a reminder of the fence, a reminder that she had planted her flag in my soil and dared me to resist. But the nights belonged to me. I sat on my porch with the lantern burning, staring at that fence that would caught the moonlight and gleamed like prison bars. I could not escape the gnawing thought that my father would never forgive me for letting strangers stake a claim on what he fought. To keep my jaw clenched until it hurt, my fingers drummed against the armrest, counting the hours until the rage inside me would snap. The breaking point came without ceremony. Clouds smothered the stars. At night the wind hissed across the fields, carrying the smell of rain. My heart thundered as I pulled on my gloves and grabbed the old crowbar from the shed. My boots sank into the damp soil. With every step closer to the fence, each breath was heavy, each muscle tight. The silence of the night seemed to hold its breath with me. I pressed the iron against the first board, and pride, the crackle with splitting, echoed across the pasture, a sound so sweet it felt like justice itself. I ripped another plank loose, then another. My anger poured into every motion. Sweat rolled down my temples. Rain began to fall in a slow, steady drizzle, soaking my shirt, clinging to my skin. But I did not stop. My arms swung my boots, stomped my breath, tore through the night. The fence crashed piece by piece into the mud until the line that scarred my land lay broken and defeated. When the last post toppled, I stood over the wreckage, chest heaving, soaked in rain and triumph. The air smelled of wet earth and sawdust. My fists throbbed, but the pain only fed the satisfaction. I had reclaimed what was mine, even if only for a moment. My cattle mooed in the distance, their voices carrying like a chorus of approval. The land was free again. By sunrise, the storm had passed. The ground steamed under the rising light, and the destroyed fence lay scattered like bones across the pasture. I stood tall for the first time in days. A smile tugging at my lips. The ranch looked whole again, whole and untouchable. I believed the battle was over. But Linda never surrendered. She arrived that morning with the fury of a general. Her car screeched to a stop, gravel spraying. She stormed across the mud in polished heels, eyes blazing. Her voice tore into the air. You think you could defy me? You think you could destroy what we built? I met her rage with silence. My arms crossed my boots, planted firmly on my soil. Her eyes flicked over the wreckage, then back to me. The smirk returned, crueler than ever. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. She gestured, and two men stepped out of the car, briefcases in hand. Their suits were dark, their expressions sharper than knives. Lawyers, they pulled out papers thick with printed words. The sight of them churned my stomach. We will sue you for destruction, community property, trespassing, and damages, she said with venom. You will lose everything before you know it. The neighbors gathered again, drawn by the spectacle. Their whispers pricked my ears like thorns. Some gasped, others nodded in grim approval. The crowd leaned toward her words, swayed by the threat of legal weight. I searched their faces for one shred of support, but none offered it. Their silence once again chained me alone against her. The ground beneath me felt less steady. My triumph of the night dissolved into dread. The law was not on my side. I knew it. She had lawyers, money, influence, and the ear of frightened neighbors. I had only truth, and the broken was scattered across the pasture. For the first time, doubt gnawed at me. Was I reckless? Was I foolish to believe I could fight her alone? My chest tightened as the lawyers shoved documents at me, paragraphs filled with words designed to crush a man like me. My ranch suddenly felt fragile, my pride fragile, my future fragile. Linda leaned closer, her perfume suffocating, her words sharper than thorns. Enjoy your land. While you will not have it much longer. Her voice lingered even after she turned and walked away. Her heels clicked against the gravel, like a judge striking a gavel with each step. The lawyers followed her back to the car. The door slammed, the engine roared, the dust swallowed them whole. The crowd began to disperse again, whispering louder this time. A few glanced back at me, pity softened their eyes. But pity was not what I needed. I needed strength. I needed a way to strike back harder than before. The sun climbed higher, spilling light over the ruins of the fence. My chest still heaved, my heart still thudded, the fear lingered. But underneath it, something else stirred, something darker and stronger than fear, something that whispered through the dust and mud, telling me that Linda had made her own mistake. She believed a fence and a lawsuit could break me. She believed her power was absolute. But she had underestimated the man who had nothing left to lose. The weight of the lawsuit pressed on me like a storm cloud. I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread out across the wood, their inked paragraphs twisting into chains. Each line threatened to choke away my land, my freedom, my pride. The ranch felt quieter than usual, the cattle grazing in the distance, the wind sliding across the fields. But inside, my chest of war raged louder than thunder. I knew I could not fight Linda with brute force. She thrived on chaos, and control. Her power was not in fences or boards. It was in fear and paperwork, in convincing others that she was untouchable. If I was going to survive, I needed more than anger. I needed strategy. I drove to the county office. The next morning, the smell of old paper and dust filling the stale air. Rows of cabinets loomed over me, each drawer stuffed with records. I sifted through files, names, dates, transactions. My fingers turned black with ink, dust my eyes burned from reading. But then I found a folder stamped with the HOA seal. Inside were receipts, contracts, minutes of meetings, and among them threads of corruption woven like poison. She had been funneling community money into her own accounts, disguising it as maintenance fees and property improvements. She was not protecting the community, she was robbing it. The discovery ignited something fierce inside me. Each page became a weapon, each line of numbers a blade. I copied everything, carefully storing it in folders and flash drives. My hands trembled not with fear, but with anticipation. At night, I sat by the firelight, piecing together her downfall. The crackle of flames matched the beat of my heart. I mapped out connections between payments, false fines, and construction deals that led back to her friends. She had built her little empire on lies and greed. I smiled for the first time in weeks. It was not just about my ranch anymore. It was about exposing the truth. Whispers began to spread once I shared bits of evidence with a few neighbors. A doubt that had once hung in their eyes started to shift. They began to question the endless fines, the unnecessary rules. They began to wonder if Linda was not the guardian of order, but the thief of their peace. I saw cracks forming in the shield of silence she had built. Still, I kept my movements quiet. I knew she was watching me, waiting for another misstep. I let her believe I was cornered while I built my arsenal in the shadows. I contacted a local reporter, one known for exposing small-town corruption. I handed him copies of the documents, watching his eyes widen as he flipped through the pages. He promised me the truth would not stay hidden. Days stretched into nights filled with planning. My body grew weary, but my resolve sharpened like a blade. Each sunrise brought me closer to the moment she would face her own fence, a wall of lies she could not climb. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, I stood at the edge of my land, staring at the empty stretch where her fence once stood. The wind was cool, the grass swayed. My mind replayed her threats, her smug laughter, her declaration that I would lose everything. But now I held her weakness in my hands. She thought power made her invincible, but greed had made her careless. I gathered the neighbors I trusted, men and women who had lived under her thumb for too long around the crackling fire. I laid out the truth. I showed them the receipts, the transfers, the evidence of her theft. Their faces shifted from shock to fury one by one. They pledged to stand with me. The silence that once shielded her was breaking. Linda still strutted to the neighborhood, shoulders high, chin sharp, believing she had already crushed me. She filed more papers, more threats, each envelope heavier than the last. She did not know the ground beneath her feet was already crumbling. The night before the hearing, I sat awake, staring at the files spread before me. My heart pounded not with fear, but with determination. I thought of my father, the legacy carved into this land. I thought of the sweat and the years poured into every acre. I thought of the neighbors who finally had hope in their eyes. I would not just fight for myself, I would fight for all of us. When dawn arrived, I felt ready. The sky blazed gold, the air smelled of dew, and promised. The ranch stood quiet behind me. As I climbed into my truck, the courthouse waited ahead. And with it the chance to end her reign, the papers rattled on the seat beside me like drums before battle. I gripped the wheel tighter, my jaw set, my eyes steady. She declared war with fences and lawsuits. I would end it with truth, and fire. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time, I knew victory was possible.